It's an interesting intersection between Esperanza's take on human rights in Colombia and Michael's take on the politics of immigration and the invisibility of the immigrant experience, which is, we're mostly talking about Mexico and Central America. That is, although, as you know, the amount of Latinos only form a percentage of the total number of undocumented immigrants in the United States, and in a sense get like over-publicized and demonized as a result of that. And also, the majority of Latinos that live in the United States are not immigrants, but right now there's a new stereotype that has been created, that talks about Latinos, basically equates them with being immigrants, even though most of us have lived here for generations and speak English as well as Spanish. So the first thing I wanted Marcos to talk about, why you wanted to have this exhibition and what was it about their work that you felt really fit into what you wanted to bring up in the public eye and how it fits into the Taller Boricua, the aesthetic.
Aesthetic, yeah. Well, yeah, I think, I think it's not only the Taller Boricua aesthetic, I think it's the aesthetics of a whole generation of art that came up from the 70s on. And a lot of this work, I selected it because it's work based on objects, and that aesthetic was sort of like born out of the 70s, and it incorporated like a lot of the artists who were practicing during that period. So how does Michael and Esperanza fit into this whole spectrum of aesthetics that have been? It's interesting because is this part of the New York aesthetic, or is this part of the outsider aesthetic, or is this part of the American art history aesthetic? So all these things are sort of like lurking in the background still after 30, 40 years, And so in a way we have to give vision to that initiative. And so that basically that's why I think I selected this work, because I think it's a continuation of this, which is called the outsider aesthetic, or whatever it is called, because actually it doesn't have a place yet, I think, in art, in the written art history of the Americas. So I think we have to push that, and get it validated. So anyway, that in a roundabout way, and I also like their work.
Yeah.
I think they're great artists, and I think they've been doing art against the tides, just like we all have been doing art against the tides, because it's like an uphill battle, like salmon's going upstream, Yeah, because we don't get recognized. Right. But anyway, it's been going on for a long time. Even I think our own people don't recognize it. The art world does not recognize it, has not recognized it. So anyway, as an alternative art place, that's what we're about. We're about doing things like that fit into that mold, So that's,
Well, I just want to repeat again this idea of the two places that your guys' work is coming from, which is it represents how the powers that be, in our hemisphere affect the Latino experience. And, the Latino experience is divided between those of us who live in the United States and are US Latinos, and then what's happening in Latin America, which at times, creates the immigration that becomes so controversial, right? So that, I like to stay in touch with both sides of the issue. And it's funny because a lot of people focus on one thing or the other. There's a lot of people you get in the academy and like they're all just focused on Latin America, and they don't know a thing about what's going on with U.S. Latinos. And then those of us who are U.S. Latinos, unless we make a big effort, we lose touch with what's going on in Latin America. So that's kind of a really nice thing about the show. So I wanted to ask Esperanza a little bit about how some of the works in the show flow out of your previous work. I've seen a lot of your previous work. There's object use in them, and a lot of times they're parts of the body. You really are focused on the body, and so in this particular exhibition, you have objects that represent a fetus, and skulls, right? So tell me a little bit about how it evolved from your previous work, or how this is maybe even a culmination of stuff that you've been trying to work out for several years in your work. I don't think there's a button.
Hello?
Yeah,
Oh,
there
look
you
at that.
It's alive.
Okay. I had no idea that it was working. All right. Well, as we were talking with Diogenes and Patricia, I've been doing encaustic paintings. In fact, I showed at a Taller Boricua in 1992. Marcos was the curator then, and most of the work were encaustic reliefs with clay images on top. And it all referred to the body. I mean, I think that the body is a great representation for people and culture. I'm not trying to like sexualize the body, even though some people misinterpret things, but they can do whatever they want with their ideas. But for instance, in the other room, the work that's called Emerald Tears, that's much more specifically about Colombia. The story about how life begins, the legacy story of the world in Colombia refers to the Emerald Tears, which is from this, you could call it fable story of these two persons that were created by gods, and they made a mistake, and so of course the woman had to cry because it was her mistake. And from her eyes came emeralds, the Emerald Tears. So there are these two large stones near in the mountains near Bogota that refer to that. And I think it's a remarkable thing what the world is holding inside of it: diamonds, gold, platinum, emeralds. But it's unfortunate that most of the countries that have these remarkable resources always end up in these terrible civil conflicts. And as Alicia and I spoke, she wrote so beautifully about my work, Alicia J.P. Cooper, right? J.D. Cooper. I think that a lot of conflicts are just created. I think, this whole colonial stage of the Americas and half the world was created just simply, it's an economic grab. And there's just, to me, just so much destruction. There's so much remarkable destruction of people, culture, and everything that is precious just for the economic gain. I mean, these paintings, which are encaustic, that go back to my earlier work, they refer to different parts of the world where there is civil conflict or revolutions. So some of them are large, some of them are small. And in my interpretation of the work, they refer to lava. Lava, when it comes towards anything, it destroys, it devours everything in its path. Whatever was there ceases to exist. So, for me, it's like there are all these civil conflicts, all these revolutions that are caused what? So you could take the diamonds, so you could take the special dirt that we need for computers and phones, so that you could take the emeralds. You know, and so that work, and I tried to explain this to someone at the opening. I had an uncle, I come from a really unusual family. One of my uncles was an emerald dealer. He began working in the mines when he was 14. I have uncles and cousins that were bullfighters. My cousin was the youngest female bullfighter in Latin America. They called her La Cordobesa. You know, dancers, singers, I mean, like the opposite of what my family became when we got here, dentists. Well, no, I go along. I'm an artist. I feel like I am part of that trajectory of my original family. So through my uncle, meeting my cousins, I went to Toronto a year ago to kind of rescue my mother. She got very sick. And in the middle of the rescue, I meet my cousins. My cousin Marta, her father was in the emerald mines. The conversations I had with her just completely blew my mind. I mean, just unbelievable. Like all the stories that I learned about my uncle and their family and how he started out at 14 and then he was super wealthy and then they had to escape the country so they wouldn't be slaughtered and killed. Because, you know, it's like you can have, but up to a certain point, otherwise, you know, you get kidnapped, you get killed. This is Colombia. And how they ended up in this country and how his death, he died, his lungs got charred. I don't know all the stories that go in between, so that's where the emerald lung comes from, the charring of the lungs. So I don't know, you know, it's like, for me, it's like I feel like my life is like there's the creation fable, but I feel like so much of my life through my family, and maybe a lot of us feel like this, we don't have to be Latin American. We get so much information from our family through stories. You know, we're all storytellers, and then you don't know if any of this stuff is true, but it's pretty amazing. It's like he opened up his shirt and his lungs turned black and he died immediately. I was like, wow, I got to do a piece about that. That's just awful and creepy and so sad. But, you know, it just, so then, you know, people are like, oh, well, you know, Gabriel Marquez, of course, Colombia is just like that. But my question is, why? Why did we have to like develop this amazing ability to see everything so magical and weird? Because I think a lot of it has to do with all these outside forces, you know. But it's not just Latin America; it's a great part of the world outside of Europe and the United States, and maybe Canada. Is that an answer?
Yeah.
In a roundabout
kinda
way.
You know, a person's autobiography is always, you know, reflected in the work. I mean, you know, in some way. But I wanted to ask you though, the piece Black Gold that's behind you. You know, since most of the other pieces, with the exception of the painting, are, you know, just these objects that are self-contained, but you have kind of a bridal train of beads coming off of the black gold. Could you just talk about what that piece is about?
Well, that piece is referring to the way the discovery of gold affects people. I mean, that's really why we were colonized in Latin America, because, you know, Colombia was one of the entry points and they discovered gold. You know, and the Muisas had the fable of El Dorado.
Yeah.
And the Spaniards went, I mean, I don't mean to blame them.
They got the Museo de Oro.
They became like totally nuts and insane to try to find this lake, which was part of the story of El Dorado. So it was a huge massacre, a giant massacre of like an amazing civilization. So, you know, it's called black gold because, you know, referring to oil, but also it's, and you're right, it's like a bridal train. It's about this almost sacred ritual, but it's a ritual of death that we've had to participate in. And it doesn't matter what country we're from in Latin America or the Caribbean. I mean, from the introduction, and Native Americans in this country, I mean, it's African Americans in this part of the world. It's just like you know, the more you know about what actually happened, it gets to the point where you've cried so much you run out of tears. It's just like, why? Really? So it's referring to that.
It's like a trail of tears.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
There we go. And and the extraction of the gold is, what creates the exploitation and the legacy of exploitation in the country.
And in Colombia,
Yeah.
this is still going on.
Yeah.
And the government is in all this,
Yeah.
fancy negotiations with European and American companies to come in, which is, that the paramilitary is set up really to protect certain lands, because 3/4 of the land people don't live in because the paramilitary
Yeah.
will destroy them.
Yeah.
So it's, everybody thinks it's about a certain civil war conflict. No, it's about gold or emeralds
Sure.
or, oil. I mean, Colombia's had oil forever. But I'm speaking about Colombia because I know about it. I'm not saying it's the only place. We can
Yeah.
name different places that have different things. And where, the exploitation and the destruction of human beings and culture, which is more important than all those resources combined. So I'm always asking, why? I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah. Well, the use of space has an effect, and then that stand there what is the significance of it?
This is from
Yeah.
a gold leafing company that existed right below me where my studio is. It was a company that existed for like 100 years. They would gold leaf invitations for the princess of so-and-so marrying the baron of whatever. Very important stuff, real gold. That was one of the stands that was created by the workers like 100 years ago, because at that time when people needed stuff, they got out the saw, they got out the wood, they got out the nails, they built it. And I'm just contrasting that to the time that we exist now, where if you need a chair, you go to IKEA, or you go here, you go there, which is a different form of exploitation, because I'm sure the people who are creating this stuff are not being paid well.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of loss in between. There, people were much more dependent. People don't even, the average person doesn't make their own food. I mean, I think that's a loss of a lot of creativity and
Sure.
a lot of independence.
Yeah. Okay, well, let me move on over here to Michael for a bit. Your work really involves found objects, which to me reminds me a lot of what was going on in the East Village in the 80s. A lot of people using found objects, and I always liked that medium. So you reference with the latter piece, infinite labor of the cosmic race. So you're sort of suggesting that there is an attempt for the exploited worker to ascend to a certain height, but yet you're kind of on this horizontal wheel that prevents you from moving up. Am I reading that right, or yeah?
Partially.
Yeah.
All of this, all
Yeah,
of the works have to do with labor.
There's a
And,
yes.
and I'm trying to do a couple of things. I'm trying to use my art to acknowledge labor that is around us. That for many people, I think the labor is invisible, and so I'm trying to recognize that in my work. And the other thing I'm trying to do, and it's kind of a new thing with this work, is bring a greater symbolism to the whole idea of labor. And in this piece, I'm using a horizontal ladder to reference symbolically the ascent to a greater life. I'm thinking of eternal life. And the rail, the brass rail, I use it because for me the brass tubing is a coded architectural material that often indicates class. Like in restaurants and the Upper East Side and apartment buildings, bars, it's like you're in or you're not in. It's a very subtle thing, but a very effective thing. So I use the brass rail and the ladder to reference both like a continuing labor, like the idea that labor not only is necessary and ever present, but it's ongoing and forever. It's like I'm in this installation. I'm trying to create this allegory that is like going far away, but applying to the present time. And I'm using hair because I think hair is it's a material that has great symbolic meaning, and it injects itself into space like very few materials. It's a laden, loaded material, and I'm trying to talk about the labor having qualities of stamina and strength and everlasting qualities. And I'm thinking about immigrant labor, but I'm trying to change the vocabulary a bit and the thinking, because I think that word has too many connotations, like you were saying before, that maybe don't even apply.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm trying in a very abstract way here to like evolve the language and the thinking about that subject.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you have the one piece that's specifically called endless labor, right? Which is this bunch of work gloves, and work gloves are kind of disposable, and you're just showing maybe the how many. What do you think this is? 5 years of work gloves? What do you? What is the passage of time here with this?
That's a good question,
Yeah.
because that's an older piece.
Yeah.
It's about 10 years old.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but what I'm saying is like all these, how much?
Accumulation.
Yeah, how long would a worker take to use up all those gloves?
It depends on the work,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Art handling, it would take a few days.
Uh,
Because it has to be very clean and white.
Mhm.
Disposable,
And
yeah.
well, this, the snare piece is really powerful. It's a very chilling image because you're suggesting the imprisonment of the worker, which in the old days it was slavery and indentured slavery, and so we have like a newly dressed up idea of what that looks like, and even immigration reform seems to be working towards creating a different class of worker that can be exploited in ways that citizens wouldn't be. So it's another kind of trap. So tell me a little bit about this.
That's absolutely true. I was telling you about the documentary films that I saw this week, and one of them, it was a film about mostly Mexican immigrants coming through Arizona. It was mostly about the Arizona front border. And part of the film talked about NAFTA, which I've always known about, but I didn't know that the current administration has signed a new trade agreement with Colombia, Peru, and Korea. And NAFTA is just a terrible thing, man. I can't see any upside except for the 30 people that are getting wealthy. And it really described why workers have to leave their place. That's always been an issue for me. Why do we have so many immigrants in this country? I mean, what's so great about this place? I mean, it's just a question I've always had. So, anyway, NAFTA is one of the reasons that people have to leave. I forgot the other part of that question.
I just thought you'd want to comment on the making or what you're trying to evoke specifically.
It's this thing I keep bringing up of invisibility.
Yeah.
I just think that I grew up in a working class family. My uncles and my grandfather, they were all blue collar working class workers, and that's kind of how I grew up. And I just notice it in people. It's I just pay attention to people's work and what are they actually doing? It's just something that I notice, and it's entered into my art practice. And I just try to bring attention to it and see it more and more on a social political level, like why it's that way. And if people are recognized for their work, that's a good thing. And if they're not recognized, then that bothers me.
Yeah.
And if they're treated, part of my art practice too is that I've begun to learn things. Like research has just become part of my process, and I don't necessarily have to know the answers before I begin a process.
Yeah.
Which is a new thing for me. I always thought that artists had to know everything. Well, I don't believe that anymore. I think artists just have to ask questions.
Yeah.
And learning, one of the things I've learned ever since doing this project about sugarcane workers in the Dominican Republic is how prevalent forced labor is all over the world, and how it's been that way for a very long time. But even in our country, forced labor is prevalent. And that's kind of the background for endless labor. It's with that in mind that I'm doing that work.
Do you ever try to talk casually with the workers, you know, in restaurants or in construction sites to
All the
inform
time.
you what-
Cab drivers.
Yeah.
I love that. It's my
Yeah.
favorite conversation. Just to find out where people are from. New York is a fascinating city. You know, just to talk to people about where they come from and why they came here. What are they doing? I love that conversation, and it informs a lot of what I do.
Right, right. That's great. Okay, so one thing I want to do is ask both of you, I'll start with Esperanza, to take us through a little bit your creative process. How do you conceive of a work, and what kind of plan do you make? Are you more or less spontaneous? And you know, how do you go about? Is it different for different pieces, or you know?
Well, the way that I start working on something is, let's say these two pieces started with reading about civil conflict in different places, and especially what breaks my heart, what really gets to me is when children are mistreated. You know, I understand, okay, soldiers want to blow each other up, you don't touch children. So of course, we've all seen the newspapers, we've all seen it on Facebook, or young women, you know, it's like, I just don't understand that. And so then I can't stop thinking about something. And so I figure if I can't stop thinking about something, I gotta make some art about it because it will drive me crazy, you know? Because I'm thinking about it so often that I think, okay, this is just my mind telling me I've gotta do something. So I began working on these, thinking about, you know, these situations, as Michael was saying, make 30 people rich and devastate entire communities and devastate land and culture and every kind of resource imaginable. And to me, it's a horror. And then through reading and through research, you know, you find out so much information, you realize, wow, this is like the plague, political plague. And so I started working on this. So I began just with that big central encaustic piece. And so then I started thinking about other places. So it just kept growing. There's actually another piece that's in my studio because there's just so much. I mean, we both went to the same film series at the Abraham Lincoln.
Oh yeah, I heard about that
really
earlier today. Yeah.
It was very upsetting. And you know, and it's just, my question is, how comfortable do Americans, and I know I'm one of them, and Europeans have to be? Why do we need so much, and why do we think it's okay for other people to have very, very little, and like, you know, not have the right to raise their children in peace, you know, in a peaceful place and plant some flowers. So that's what happens. I keep having thoughts, and I figured the only way I can like stop it and put it somewhere is to actually start making art about it. So that one piece leads to another. The first piece was this piece. Then that led to that, and then it finished off the work in the other room, the Emerald Tears. Then it came back here, then it went there, and then now it's back in my studio because, you know, it's, and of course, you know, I'm thinking like, you know, about art. Art, of course, is important, and I'm happy that I have some place that I can dispose these feelings. Yes, you know, art is important, and the history of art is important, and I'm impacted by other people's work, and you know, seeing art is beautiful, and it's a place where I can rest. But making art is a more energetic and active experience for me. Did I explain that at all?
Yeah. You know, before we get to Michael, though, this Sonata Score piece right here, like, isn't that like kind of unusual for you, or am I wrong?
This
Yeah.
piece, I don't think it's unusual. I mean, I've been painting encaustic on wood for, oh God, if I have to think about the amount of time, it would make me feel tragic. No, like 20, let me think. Yeah. Yes, go ahead.
Can I say something? Yeah. Is this on?
Yes.
No? Me?
We can hear you anyway.
Okay. Anyway, yeah, this is not that big. Anyway, so you're saying while you create a piece of art, Your mind, you're thinking about, like, at the same time, the technique that's
Yes.
involved, along with the current events that you read, and you're thinking also about uh, what you're going to do in relation to your personal life, your involvement with family or whatever. You're saying all these things are happening at the same time that you're creating one piece, right? And then what happens? That piece becomes part of all these, all those influences that are running through your mind at the same
Right.
time,
Right.
right?
Yes.
Okay, that's a very interesting. So then at the end, you have a piece. Then how do you title it?
All right. Well, this one, because it's based on this idea of, well, of course, it's referring to art. You know, there are certain artists that I really loved and admired, and one of the best experiences I had. Someone asked me what was the best education I had. It was working at the Museum of Modern Art. I was a lecturer there, and I would literally get to sit in front of artwork for hours when I wasn't actually giving a lecture. And it was the most amazing thing to just sit there and just absorb. And I mean, art can be like a revolution in ourselves. So all of that is in my head, and I love to look at art. It's, you know, it's such a power, and it's such a, to me, a positive energy, even if it's about destructive things. So it's referring to that. And yes, you know, it's like I'm in a different mindset. When I did encaustic paintings on wood years ago, they were mainly white. They were like blue and white. I mean, I showed them in different museums and stuff, and they were dealing that. I was in a different state of mind, though. At that time, I don't know. I was so naive. I was believing as human beings, you know, we had greater energy, greater ability to affect things. And I think that the culture has changed a great deal, that I think the individual doesn't have as much power, at least in my mind, as they used to. And I think that these 30 rich people are having this terrible effect on the world and controlling things. And so that is referred to in the work, this lack of control.
Okay.
And as far as hanging works, I've been doing hanging works for years. What happened here is it's singular, and it's a little more aggressive.
Okay.
So can I say,
Sure.
in a sense, do you think then that the artist has a responsibility to civilization, to society, by creating their own work?
I don't think we have a responsibility. I mean, every artist will choose that for themselves. For me, the person I am, I feel like that's what I'm reacting to. I feel like a sense of responsibility because I can't ignore the world. But that's just me. I don't think everyone has to do that. But for me, it has an impact.
Because we already know that, in general, the art world revolves around capitalism, right? You do a commodity piece, you sell it, you get money, you become a superstar or whatever, you know? So, and that's one of the things that we've fallen back on, because we've created a lot of art that deals a lot with, not, let's just say you guys, it deals a lot with society, it deals a lot with conscience and social conscience, et cetera, et cetera. There's 101 things. And in our society, that's not part of our system. It's not part of our system. So how do we overcome that, you know, while we're still practicing art righteously, dealing with whatever the issues, and then we have a whole world out there that's practicing so-called capitalism. In other words, you know, you got to sell your work. We all got to sell our work to survive. But then it comes to a level where no more do you need to sell your work to survive, but then it goes over, you know, and then you got the have-nots, and we got the 1%ers, and we got the 99%ers, just like everybody else. How do we overcome, or do you think we would ever overcome that and reach the other side, where we are fairly compensated for our work, or what? I don't know. It's out there.
I think that's a very personal question, and I think it's a big question, and we think about it, we talk about it a lot. For me, I think that the work has to speak to me. I have to get something from my own work to keep doing the work. I have to please myself first, and this is an ongoing thing. Like this piece here at Taller, I was very excited to do this piece because I always wanted to show here and I wanted to do something special for this place. And I had a brand new studio that was empty, and then this installation resulted from that. But this was the first place I saw it. You know, I had drawings and little things in my studio, but this was like the first time I saw it. And I love coming up here just to hang out with it because I'm still getting stuff from it. And for me, that's what I need to do, is just please myself with my work and then do it as good as I can do it, and then try to share it as much as I can. Like, we worked really hard to promote this show in ways that we haven't really done before. And that's our own responsibility to ourselves to do that. But this is sort of a fluid, ongoing thing that we're always redefining, I think. How to be better at this and how to continue it. But I do think that the main thing for me is that I get my own validation from the work. That if I'm waiting for an outside place, then I'm fucked. You know.
Thank you.
Can I answer that?
Sure, jump in.
I mean, I have some friends who are doing really, really well, and I would never take that away from them because they're good people. But I have to say, it's a completely different experience in the world. You know, I mean, like, there's no limo coming to pick me up. I took the subway. And I don't know if that's a negative or a positive because, you know, I think, you know, like the Jackson Pollock Foundation, if, let's say, artists can do very well and then they create a foundation, then everyone's doing better. I mean, I think it depends on how that person chooses to deal with their wealth. If people just adore the work and they're like, you know, okay, the drawing is 10 by 10, I'll take it for 30,000. Okay. That happens for some people, and it happens easily, and I cannot take that away from them. This idea of, you know, yes, we are working in a capitalist world. We are. Obviously, if it was more important to me, I would be in a different place. But not that I am against making a living. I do want to make a living, and, you know, and I know that when you show your work more, your impact is stronger, or at least people pay attention to whatever it is that your work is about. But yes, that's a very philosophical question that you're asking that we all need to think about in our own way.
How do you answer that for yourself, Marcos?
Well, yeah.
He's also an artist.
I'm the curator. I'm not supposed to answer that. That's the way. No. Well, I agree with you all because I think we do artwork for self-satisfaction and to promote, you know, certain points of view. You know, what I'm looking at is not that so much, but the reaching level. How do you, you know, how do then you disseminate these ideas and pollinate, you know, different minds or whatever. You know, that's my preoccupation, and not so much about doing artwork, you know, but about reaching, about going over the hill.
One of the things that we've done with this show is get writers to, like Alicia, to help us with that, because that's one of the tools that we're using to do that reaching with.
Can I respond to that?
Sure.
Sorry, Alicia. I have to say, that writing on the wall has made such a huge effect because, I mean, she came to my studio, we spoke, I gave her my writing on my ideas. But what she gave me back, and Ed is a writer, you know, the power of a writer is incredible because it's almost like a translator. You know, there were people who came to the opening who have thought they knew my work. And when they read the writing and then asked me to take them around, I mean, the respect they gave me, I thought it was incredible because I thought, you know, I mean, these people were like, you know, kind of rude to me before. I was like, okay, what happened? You know, but I think it is like the translation because I think as artists, we are not always good at translating what it is that we are, what we're working about in a language that can be digested by other people. You know, we can sound like we're like half out of our minds. It's like, oh yeah, and then this happened, and this is so important, and everybody's like, okay, relax.
Well, the other part of that that you're raising, that issue you're raising, is just doing the very best job that we can do. Just whenever these opportunities come along to exhibit, just do the best work that we can do and really push it because it's a finite thing. You know, they don't continue. We're not going to be around forever, and so we want to just make the most of our opportunities as they happen.
Can I say something?
Go ahead.
And I wanted to bring it to Ed. See, because I think, because the four of us, I think, are similar. I mean, the way I see us, and forgive me if I sound kind of silly or pathetic. I mean, I see us more as culture soldiers than anything else.
Yeah.
You know, we're representing more than ourselves. As most of us here in this room, we're representing more than ourselves. And I think that's harder to digest. That's harder for people to take in. Because it's not just like, you're amazing with encaustic, that's incredible. Because it's more than just encaustic or your use of human hair is incredible, Michael. You know, it's human hair over there, right? That's really creepy. But, so I mean, I think then it's a different kind of artist, you know. I think it doesn't fit in the, you know, as writers also. You don't fit into the normal stream of capitalism.
Is it time to take questions from the audience?